3%. Now, we have an agricultural budget, an annual budget of 1.442 billion. And Jay, the reason why I gave those stats and those figures, you realize some things don't add up. If agriculture is this important, the basics of life is really food and water, right? Obviously shelter as well and clothing. Agriculture comes to the top, and the least or very small amount of money every year is given to our farmers, our food producers, our agri-stakeholders, our agro-processors, our middlemen, so I think there's a big gap, Jason, in the agricultural sector, and I'm not speaking of the ills of a last regime or a couple last regimes. These problems have been existing for the last 3 decades in my observation. I am 34 years old, all right?
Yeah. Do you think it's part time for us to have a bigger conversation? Because I wonder if indeed I think there is clearly a correlation between lifestyle and how we eat and the fact that we, as Trinbagonians, this 1.5 million that live on the island, our palate, it changed over the years. I mean, I grew up down south in Erin in the 80s. I know about sapodilla, I know about my mango, my plum. We have now strawberries in the mix. We have blueberries. We have grapes. That wasn't readily available when I was growing up. And even the fact that the pace, the constant pace, the fast food, the on-the-go stuff, it adds up. So I think, let me ask you, do you think it's time for us to have a bigger conversation as to our lifestyle and what we eat?
Definitely, Jay. So that is a huge question. I could lecture on that for a couple of hours as well. But in a very brief summary, in the last, let's say, 2 decades, we have been working for more money. So we want to spend more money on luxurious foods. That's the general consensus. Now, luxurious may not always be healthier. And what has happened is that we have become very Europeanized, Americanized, and we adopt a lot of those diets. So we are indirectly demanding those type of foods and food ingredients as well as beverages, all right? So if you look at how much foods we import into this country, Jay, you will see that list is a huge list, and it will comprise of like cereals, grapes, apples, pears, sugar and confectionaries, even animal and vegetable fats and oils, even dairy products like cheese and milk, meat, seafood, alcohol, and even non-alcoholic beverages. So we have to relook at what we are being taught, what we should eat, and how to really circulate those funds within the economy. Yeah.
Let me ask, if you get an audience with the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Senator Ravi Ratiram, or even the Minister in the Ministry of Agriculture, Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
What would be your advice to them this week? If you get that one-on-one, you sit with them in an office,
right,
and you could just be frank and let them know what time it is in a meaningful way. What will be said?
Okay, so just give me maybe 2-3 minutes, because I have a few things to say well in a short space of time. We have to look at the declining contribution to GDP, right? Why is that being so, and why is the term diversification always being used, in a lot of mandates, and it's not really being done in terms of financial and other resources, right? So we need a proper diversification strategy and a long-term food production plan, not a 5 or 10-year food production plan. That's the first thing I'd like to identify. The second thing is the list of food import items. And we need to really look at the alternatives locally that we could produce, grow, and consume in a safe and sustainable manner. Now, Jay, I'll bring a question to you, maybe in a couple of minutes, but I'll hold that thought for a while. You see, agriculture now has become very different, and we have to understand the different impacts of climate change in terms of excessive droughts and floods. So our production methods and methodologies and adoption strategies need to be so much more different. We have to choose the correct varieties. We have to understand how that impacts livestock production. And even mentioning livestock production, what about all the illegal importation of livestock in Trinidad and Tobago? We do have borders, they are being patrolled. Why are we having so much illegal livestock in the country? You're not breaking those barriers. Even you look at the pest and disease outbreaks now in the agriculture sector. You have the huge pest, the giant African snail. 1 month from now, Jason, when rain going to fall, you're going to see all them snails popping back out because they love rain, they love to fet, right? You have the tomato leaf miner, you have the red palm weevil, you have the little yellow of coconut, you have frosty pod rot of cocoa. You have so many that we need to really take rigid control of. Even, Jason, I'm not sure if you were so lucky as to get some family land, and especially if it was state land being passed on from your foreparents to yourself, you would have realized that land tenureship is a huge issue. And just the transferring on of names and assets from one owner, the older owner, to the younger owner, takes months to even years, right? These issues have been going on such a long while, and we need to really, take control of it. Also, the availability. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. The availability, I'll bring up my point after. Availability of...
No problem. The availability of arable agricultural land. That's really, really important. And also, why is agricultural land being given for industrial and residential purposes? That's really not how it's supposed to be.
Well, I mean, lots of farmers now putting up apartments, especially in places like Aranguez and other areas where it's fertile land, where that would have been a breadbasket. It's now,
of course,
it's now apartments. But let me ask you though, Fredia lastly, you think we could? I mean, that's a real major issue, and I find we don't take it serious. How could we really put a dent on those who are looking to reap what you sow?
I will tell you that Fredia larceny has been and still is a significant problem for the last, I don't know, however long. But the last administration did beef up the Fredia larceny unit. They got some new vehicles. They got some trained officers. So you can track and see the impact of the Fredia larceny squad. However, the Fredia larceny squad still needs so much more resources. And you really need to put those squads in the farming communities so that you'll have the most impact. Remember, you could lose so much food due to larceny. Yeah, and that's a severe loss for many farmers. Not much farmers, and I can tell you because I am a farmer and I go through the same issues. I could try to afford to maybe buy seedlings, buy fertilizer, buy some safe agrochemicals, have the current practices, have good irrigation systems. But I really can't afford to fence my land. It's very expensive, right? I didn't even make enough money off of the crop to put on a fixed cost like that. So all of those things we have to take into consideration, and that is where the state has to jump in and say, here's what, we could take that on, let us deal with that for you. You go and continue producing food in a safe and nutritious manner for the population.
Let me ask, how those men, so like areas, as mentioned, Aranguez, parts of central Shogunas, where we know fertile land, it would have been used to bring forward so much crops over the years. And we've seen big apartments. Most of those farmers were paying for that by cash. I mean, how are they getting the permission and the permits to just throw up those big apartments on agricultural land?
Exactly, and that is where paperwork and all these paper trails supposed to be in place. If the authorities in charge giving them the approval, then they get through. And then you really have to ask yourself, on the agricultural lands that were there before, were they really farmers? Was it really productive? Right? So that's the kind of hard questions you have to ask. In addition to, why I'm always angry about this agricultural budget, Jay, is because improper data collection and information sharing and analysis leads to a very low agricultural budget. I don't really think the forces that we understand the true potential of agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. I think when you do these surveys from those organizations that collect, you have 10 goats, you have 5 sheep, you have 20 lettuce. They don't really collect very accurate data. They don't understand what the whole value chain of agriculture really involves and where food is really being transported from the farm to the wholesale market to the hotels, All of these are things we need to get to the nitty-gritty. And that is why I need a lot of technical staff on board to understand the intricacies of the food value chain.
How could we spread the crop a little more and be a little more, I would say, again, I'm looking at what's available, always readily available, yeah. Pimento, tomato. I mean, how much pimento we could really eat. Why are farmers not spreading it out a little bit more and bringing, let's say the avocado. Why my avocado ought to be coming from the Dominican Republic, Riyadh? When I'm asking
Right.
the man in the market, they tell me these abuka from quite DR, or why did I take
Yeah.
a boat or a plane to get here?
To come here. So let me address the first question. You talk about production planning, and that really needs some help because farmers are good at production, The coordination part of production or coordinated production throughout the 12 months of the year should really happen by trade agencies. And yes, I know it's a free market and everybody could sell their own price and all of these things. But you must have some food production coordination. At one single point in time, you must know not what you sell, but what you have. Right? That is really understanding part of food security. In addition to, we really need proper genetic stock and better production methods being applied to the farms here, right? So that we can really boost local avocado production for your sake, Jay. So all of these are things we really need to look at. And like I said, these are not issues that pop up last week, overnight, or last month, or last year, or last decade, They were existing so very long, right? So we need dedicated staff with the resources to help the farming community, to help the agro-processing community, and even what I don't find that we pay much attention to, especially in agriculture, is exporting agricultural commodities. Yes, I know it has a lot of paperwork involved, a lot of screening involved, a lot of testing involved. But here's what, if you want to earn USD, and if you're talking about diversification, you need to export agricultural commodities.
Yeah.
You need to.
Let me ask, and I want you to be frank with me this morning. Are financial institutions favorable to the farmers when you step in?
I will tell you, I do business plans for dozens and dozens and dozens of clients. And to be really honest, if you don't have all the paperwork intact, a professionally done business plan, everything must be signed and stamped and all of this stuff, the institutions will not take you on. And many times institutions in the public sector, who judges their performance? If you're supposed to give out loans, right, and you only give out 10 loans and you're supposed to give out at least 100, or vice versa, if you're supposed to spend out 100 million a year, right, giving farmers or agro-processors or food producers loan, right? Who really monitors that type of efficiency and work? We need to understand the intricacies of how the farming sector operates. Remember, something as simple as land tenureship being held back from father to son, for example. Somebody can't get a loan because they don't have the proper paperwork in place. You're asking a farmer to get a farmer's badge, but guess what? Without a farmer's badge, you can't get the loan. But even before that, you can't get your land tenureship documents in place, so you can't get your farmer's badge, so you can't show the bank anything. Right? So you need to understand, you need to be a little more lenient with farmers if you really want to push the food production sector. I will plainly say I love the drive that Republic Bank has taken in the last year and a half, maybe two. They have really supported farmers. I am not advocating for any particular body, but I have seen where they stepped in and facilitated so many SME agribusiness loans.
Riyad, let me ask, and I know this one might be controversial, but it's the reality of the day, and the fact is, it's here and it's going anywhere. Do you think we are in place? Do we have the structure in place for this marijuana production we hear about? We're hearing talks of, marijuana being we know it's a major cash crop. Is the infrastructure there? Are the farmers ready in that regard? If they get approvals and license to grow and to sell and distribute marijuana?
I am not a subject matter expert. I have a couple on board in the company. However, for my knowledge and experience, I will tell you that we need a lot of certification, a lot of testing labs, a lot of infrastructure set up, the proper paperwork and contracts to transport the commodity we want to produce abroad. So I think, yes, the idea of it sounds good, but there's a lot of work to get done. And I think if the new government is really persistent, I think we will get through. It could save Trinidad and Tobago to some extent. However, another part of the population says, here's what, why can't we invest in a food commodity, that you could utilize back in your country? You could still export, as well as you could use like non-conventional feed resources for livestock. You could turn back some of the waste into fertilizer or compost. So there are arguments between the scientific minds on the proposal, However, anything that will generate consistent supply of foreign exchange within the agriculture sector for our people, I will support. You have my full technical staff available. You have me available. I am always here, right? But I just think we need a lot of infrastructure to be put in place first. Yeah.
What's our best option right now in terms of a crop that's readily available that could really bring much needed forex? I know cocoa was king. Cocoa is very much requested, but we do have the capacity to cater for the audience. But outside of that, what's a crop right now that we could target, send out to get some big returns?
Actually, I really was going to bank on that chocolate making. Honey making, Trinidad and Tobago, we won so many awards a couple decades ago. So our chocolate was known, our honey was known. What I would really like us to put some investment in is to plant some tropical fruits, the more indigenous and locally available ones like Mami Sipote, Sapodilla. Just like how we buy in apple grapes, apple grapes and pears from other countries, I want us to really get those crops out. Yes, I know it's a long-term investment, but it will save the country for the next 20 or 30 years. And yes, I know land space could be a possible issue. However, that is why we have all these nice grafting methods. And we have so much uncultivated lands, especially in the Caroni areas, right? We're supposed to get those under some rigorous food production.
Riyad, I want to thank you as always, my friend. Great conversation. Let's keep it going. Let's not wait too long again to have our next discourse. And hopefully we'll see if the newly appointed ministers are able to bring some much needed, I would say, energy and structure into their portfolio. All the best, Riyad. That's right. Getting into that agriculture discussion, and of course, it's could potentially be one of those major tools for that diversification drive we all talk about. We come back, a couple segments to take care of before we lock things off officially at 8 a.m. See you soon.